Hi, and welcome to Lecture 4. In Lecture 4, we'll talk about blocks, how they're used, as well as how to incorporate them into your own methods. Some people get thrown off by blocks in Ruby because other languages don't have blocks, but just think of them as chunks of code that are being executed. You pass them in between the curly braces or the keywords do and end, and they are passed into methods as the last parameter into a method. The convention is that you use the curly braces when the block content is a single line, and if a block content spans multiple lines, you pass it in as in between the do and end keywords. And blocks are often used as iterators. So we saw this example all the way back, where you have a number and a times method, and then you pass a block, and the block basically just executes. So in this case, the times method knows that it needs to yield the control to the block, and then the block will execute. The block can also accept parameters or arguments. So in this case, it's the same method times, and you could pass in a parameter in between the pipes, like so. So in this case, it just happens to be that the parameter to the block, which is passed to as the last parameter to the times method, is index, the index of which iteration inside the loop are you in. So in this case, we say if index is greater than 0, print it, otherwise do not print it. So in this case, the iterations are 0 and 1, and only 1 is printed because that's the one that's greater than 0. Now we could have written exactly the same block in this way as well, 2 times, and because it's a single line, we'll use a curly braces instead of using do and end. So the same thing is happening. You have an index parameter, put index if index is greater than 0, and the output is still 1. If you want to use blocks in the methods that you are going to be writing, there are two ways to actually do that. There is the implicit way and the explicit way. The implicit way is everything is happening the same as it would be happening otherwise, and you check for the existence of a block with a built-in method called block given, and if a block is given, you yield the control to the block. The explicit method is you declare block as a last parameter of a method with this ampersand in front of it, and then you use a call method to call the block. So let's see both of these. The implicit method is as follows. You have this method called 2 times implicit. So basically this method is going to do something 2 times. You right away check, is the block given? If a block is not given, you right away want to return. If you don't check for the existence of a block and try to yield to a block when the block wasn't passed in, an exception will be thrown. So in this case, if you just say 2 times implicit and you don't pass a block, that's what happens. You just come back from it with a no block string which you return. But if a block is given, so in this case, you're telling it to print hello, hello will be printed 2 times. That's the implicit way. And the explicit way is very similar, but in the explicit way, you're actually declaring that this method might be accepting a block. And then you check for the existence of a block similarly with a .nil call to see if a block was given or not. If a block is not given, you return right away. Otherwise, you call the block very similar to yielding to a block. So the explicit way is a little more direct. You are saying, I want to call the block, which basically does the same thing. It yields to the block, and it prints out hello 2 times. So these two ways are very similar, and it depends on the taste how you want to use them. In summary, blocks are just code that you pass into methods. And again, this might take a little while to get used to, just because they are not very common in other languages. And if you want to incorporate the blocks into your own methods, you could either do it implicitly, by sort of pretending like a block doesn't even exist and yielding to it if it does, or you can explicitly declare it in your method and then call it and make sure to check for nil in that case as well. That's it for this lecture. In the next lecture, we'll talk about files and environment variables.